Thank you all for coming. We are here gathered to discuss the 26th session of the Conference of the Parties, shortened as COP26. It's a major United Nations climate change event, and it was under the presidency of UK. It took place in Glasgow from October 31st till November 12th. This conference has an important place for countries to come together to discuss how climate change should be tackled, and they gather to agree on global and national targets. Now, COP helps governments to set their own climate change targets and of different sectors, localities, and organizations. And today we have a diverse panel from different departments. And we are going to discuss the targets that have been discussed during the COP26 and what are their thoughts about this experience in Glasgow. Now, yes, or virtually, exactly. We're going to talk about that later. Let me introduce our panel. Dr. Deanna Lacoste and Dr. Sarathy are both professors of chemical engineering and mechanical engineering, and they are both members of the Clean Combustion Center. And we have also Dr. Jaffer. He's a professor of chemical science, and his research area is in advanced membrane and porous materials. He's also a member of the Catalysis Center. We also have our soon-to-be doctor, our PhD candidate, Natalia. She is a PhD candidate in petroleum engineering. And lastly, our beacon of student sustainability activism, Dr. Anna Margarida. Okay. Sorry if I'm butchering your names, sorry. Head of Sustainability, yes, of course. So the climate COP had met annually since '95, and only in 2015 they made the historic agreement in Paris called the Paris Agreement, named after the city hosted that event. And it was the first time where countries can sign and agree on specific targets, and it was a rule book of how they should progress in terms of climate change. So let me ask you, how do you describe your COP26 experience, and did you have any eye-opener moment in terms of things that have been done by the kingdom, or things that you heard from other participants, and or things that you experienced in Glasgow? So I'll hear from
me.
Yavuz. Okay.
Should I just?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this one. Yeah, this is working. Okay. Hello, everybody. So I will be showing pictures to get you up and running. Then you can ask the serious questions to other panelists. So I'll be there for fun, pretty much. So this is a view from the plane on the way to Edinburgh. We couldn't get hotels in Glasgow, so we had to go to Edinburgh, which is a 1-hour train ride. Next picture. Yeah, another plane view. So UK is always cloudy, always raining. Go ahead, move forward. Yes. We're approaching to Edinburgh. Yes, on the outskirts of Edinburgh. Yes, go on. And this is Edinburgh. They have a massive inland bay, the ocean, and there is a very big, we're approaching to the airport. There is a bridge, suspension bridge. I couldn't. Okay, so this is one of the lovely houses just across from our hotel, which we paid $1,000 a night, which is incredibly expensive. Thanks to COP26. Deanna says it's like $200 a night, right? Yeah. So what a bargain. So amazing. Okay, go back. We found out that's the restaurant, but we never ate there because we thought it was just a Christmas shop. So we could have eaten there. I mean, if we knew it was a restaurant. But then all the restaurants were booked for some reason. I mean, all these COP26 people, I guess. We barely had space in an Italian restaurant. Move forward. This is the test kit. So we were supposed to swab every single day for every single entrance. And at the gates, you had to show all your... Oh, I can see it there. Oh, see, I told you, smart people will answer your smart questions. Yeah, that's the scarf I got in Edinburgh. I always buy a coat and a scarf when I go to Northern Europe. This is a tradition. So the test kit is antigen tests, so rapid flow tests. They just give you a box of them. And no, it's not in the box that's circling around. The box circling around was the hygiene gift they gave us, which is very disappointing, to be honest, because it had a massive tissue papers in it, and then a hand sanitizer and mask with the replaceable PM 2.5 cartridges. So the envelope has the cartridges, the mask is just a holder. Excuse me. Move forward, yeah? Okay, so this is the pregnancy test. As you can see, I'm not pregnant. Oh, I'm not COVID. Okay, all right. So sorry, my bad. Literally, you had to wait for 15 minutes, clutching on your back. Am I positive? That 15 minutes is like years, right? And then you had to report online to this UK government. I don't know what they do with it. Yeah, you had to submit online. And then I thought we had to show these at the gates, but they didn't ask for it. So anyway, go on. Yeah. Oh, okay. So this is me tasting Haggis the first time ever. So I watch for the taste. So that's no matter what people say, Haggis are delicious and tasty. Okay, move on. This is the monument of, what was it? Okay, we don't remember. So that's a nice monument that is worth taking a picture of. So it turns out it's one of the best sites in Edinburgh. So we're just walking to the train station. Move forward. Yeah, this is the group. So as you can see, Deanna, Stefan, who got locked back in London, he's stuck there because he had to quarantine because he turned positive. We're not positive, so we're good. We're not pregnant yet. But Sarah, I think I don't know where she is. She's back. Okay, she's back. Okay, so we made it. 3/4 of it made it back to campus. We didn't leave ourselves back there. Okay, move forward. So this is the bus the COP26 was providing us to go to the site. We took this is Glasgow. Okay, I didn't take any pictures on the train. So we went to the train after that tower visiting, and then once you get to Glasgow, because there were protests, evidently, so Sarah advised not to take the train to the site, and we took the bus to the site. For the bus station, we had to walk about, I don't know, 1 kilometer or 2, and under raining. Of course, I didn't have my umbrella, so I said, well, we'll grow some more hair with the acid rain. So then we took this bus, COP26 bus. That's the only bus to the site from that station. Yeah, go forward. Yeah, okay, we get it. Yeah, this is the group. We are sitting under zero emissions sign. So we're supposed to be providing the zero emissions. And this is by the gates. So we were dropped off further away, and then we're walking to the gates. And I don't know if I have a picture close up, but the gates, there are double-lined fences. So it's not just single fence, double-lined. And these are police officers. The whole area is blocked and under surveillance. Yeah, these are the officers checking all your credentials. So we had, 5, 6 different documents to show. They check your passport, they check your UN credentials. We are the party overflow. You see my name badge there in the box. We are the party goers. So party. It was funny for me. Party overflow. So we went past these, and then you have to go through 3 more security. So three more security to arrive in the entrance of the halls. So these are the TVs that you can check what talks are happening, whether plenary or whatnot. And it also says whether it's closed to public or open to public. Based on who you are, I think you can get into those sections. But honestly, I don't see how it would be helpful to attend the plenary because you're not allowed to speak. You're just there sitting and listening. So for me, it didn't really make sense to attempt to go to a plenary talk because you can just watch it online. There's a closed circuit system. And most of those you can't get in anyway. So we went straight to the Pavilion Center, which is what our job was, to be in the Saudi Pavilion, yes. So this is the main entrance of the Pavilion area, which is most of the activities going on there, yes.
Deanna's ahead of you?
Deanna, yes, she's always ahead of me. Yeah. Okay, and Stefan, you see Stefan now, and Sarah.
A shopping mall.
Yeah, it's a shopping. Yeah, so we were desperately looking for coffee, actually. And here we are at the entrance of the pavilions. So there was. So I said, let's take a picture before we get lost. So then we can find it back there. Go on. So there are many booths for general country displays, plus the topical displays. So you could literally spend days going through each one of them, which we didn't have, but then I was able to snap some pictures. It's very well designed. All these like 1.5 degrees, there's a lot of colorful displays, everybody's pitching in. So it was hopeful, yeah. And I think we can keep going until, yeah, you can recognize, keep going, because I took a lot of pictures. Sierra Leone, this is an African country which you never really hear about, but they had a booth. I thought that was important. So this is Sierra Leone, empty booth. Yeah, they didn't have anything though. Denmark, yes, so hallways, the Tuvalu, so this is an island country in the Caribbean. They had a good display. They were really showing their interest. Yeah, IDB in, which one was this one? Okay.
IDB is International Development Bank?
Probably, yeah. Okay, so this is resilience. So I keep snapping pictures. I'm sure some of the people weren't happy, but I ignored them. So Nigeria, yeah, okay, this is European Union. So it was always full. Everybody was talking. I don't know what they were talking. And this is the main entrance area, which you had to go through here. SDG is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The European Union, both again from the outside. Again, European Union. Africa part, yeah. Okay, okay. Egypt, Bangladesh, Colombia, Egypt again. Don't know. Paramos, yeah. We heard this is the one country had the most of it, right? Colombia, yeah. Colombia said they had this plant, 80% of it in the world. We don't know what that is. If anybody knows what Paramos is.
Colombia?
Anybody from Colombia?
Tell us, what is it? Here.
Yeah,
Please
okay,
take the
sure.
cue. Woo. Nice catch.
Well, yeah, I'm Colombian, as Urbana also. So Paramos is a special region in the mountains where a lot of vegetation, like a special vegetation grows. But I don't know exactly what is the technical explanation of it. It's just like in the mountains, really high, and that's what I can say. Yeah, sorry about that.
You want to add something, the other Colombian?
So yeah, they are protected place. Paramos are protected, so one can visit Paramos and a lot of good views, vegetation, animals. So it's really nice, and they have the protection of it.
It's a resilient crop that can sequester CO2. Is that why it's pictured or pushed for? Is it an important plant that absorbs a lot of CO2 and can grow anywhere? Is that why they're...
I see a keyword here at the bottom, the soil and the peatlands. And so probably it's, I think peatlands are supposed to be a good sink of carbon. During COP26, I saw something very interesting about, it was actually Scotland. Scotland tried to buy into, after Paris Agreement, Scotland, Ireland, they tried to get into this whole thing of planting trees to offset carbons for rich European companies. So they basically cleared some lands, and it was actually peatlands that they cleared, and they planted different types of oak and cedar trees that are native to Scotland. But after 5 years, now they're ripping out all those trees. Why they're ripping out all the trees? Because they found that the net carbon loss because of clearing the land and destroying the peat land that was there, the natural land, and putting bigger trees, that they're actually losing carbon from the soil. And the scientists at Strathclyde University found this, and their whole carbon sink idea by planting trees and selling credits failed. And now they clear those trees out, try to restore the natural peatland. So again, another one of the consequences of man-made nature-based solutions, so-called nature-based solutions. We think we're doing the right thing, putting trees in a land that these plants are not very big, right? In peatlands, they're pretty small shrubs. But the natural land has a lot of purpose, which we try to reclaim and change to another use, and it's a loss in the end.
Thank you, Dr. Jaffer, for your visual answer for how you experienced COP26. I know, Dr. Mani, that you attended the convention virtually. Why did you choose to do that?
Okay, I went to one COP before. It was COP24 in Poland. I think there's some more pictures of you with large crowds in the front, and I did not enjoy it. So I had a different experience for COP26. It was COVID-26, okay? I was in Neom, and I went to get my test to go to London, or Glasgow, and I came COVID positive. So I spent 10 days in my cabin in Neom. This is me in Neom. Before my talk on Friday at COP26, a virtual talk. In a way, it was a blessing in disguise, because I had experienced what these people experienced a while ago, like when I went to Katowice in Poland. I found COP to be a highly political, a lot of talking, as Greta said. What was it? Blah, blah. Okay, they heard it firsthand. I don't know. But so I'd seen this 2 years ago. Of course, COVID is not a blessing. After I got positive, I got symptoms. It was, even though I'm vaccinated, it was pretty bad. But I gave my talk. This is I took one picture outside my cabin, okay, in Neom, before my talk. And I gave a talk on Friday, the 5th of November, which was in the Saudi Pavilion, a virtual talk about hydrogen solutions production. And then I gave another talk on Tuesday, the 9th of November, in the pavilion about the utilization of hydrogen in different sectors.
Okay.
But I got to watch everything that they saw online. So every day I'm sitting in my cabin by myself. I was fully engaged in COP26 on YouTube, yeah, and watching all the plenaries and the Blue Room. Well, so more than
This is a first COP for me, and honestly, I wouldn't even imagine that me as a student I would be selected to participate in such a huge climate change conference. So I would like to tell a few reflections from myself. First of all, I was impressed that COP26 was held in UK, which is one of the leading countries in terms of emission reductions, pledges, and they're having like a lot of politics around climate change and advertisement and so on. So the city itself and the country itself is all about, like, at least during the time of COP, was about sustainability, about climate change. You see a lot of advertisement on the streets. All is about climate change and about how to make our lives and future of our children better and more sustainable.
That's a good point. But was it all panels and advertisement? Or did you see something that showed the inclusion of society and some different ways of how the city is run?
So what also got my attention is that COP is not only about government commitments. It's a lot of more. Even we as participants, we don't, as you mentioned clearly, we don't even engage so much with the plenaries. We don't attend them where the key decisions are taking place. We were mainly concentrated in the pavilion zone, where each country had its own booth, and you can freely participate in all the booths. And especially in Saudi pavilion. So it is not only about the governmental and political talks. It's about a lot of people can go and attend as an attendee, not only as a party, but just a general attendee. So we see a lot of students, a lot of youth who come and visit it. And also what impressed me is a huge amount of climate activists outside.
Okay.
So you can see the action takes place, and it's not only about, as I say, like political decisions, but it's also about the engagement of community, and all the city becomes so vibrant. And on Saturday, the day I left, we got an email which said, be careful with the transportation because we expect to have around 100,000 people today on the streets. And I would like to emphasize that Glasgow is a relatively small city. It's just a bit more about 600,000 people who are. And imagine having all COP participants on the same day plus 100,000 people on the streets. It's completely unusual for such a small city like Glasgow. So the whole experience was not only about the conference, but also about seeing all this happening.
Yeah, that's really good to see. And also it's a really good chance for Scotland and Glasgow to showcase their efforts and how they are implementing some actions to mitigate and adapt to climate change. And speaking of mitigating and adapting to climate change, I have some scientific issues that are mixed with economic kind of questions. So to deliver on those two goals, mitigation and adaptation, another important point that was on the table for negotiation between countries, it was to mobilize finance. And they agreed that they want to mobilize $100 billion every year to help developed nations and poor nations to adapt and mitigate climate change. Last year, they submitted a plan that basically stated that they can't really deliver on that promise until 2023. And it was said that 3 times more money was put in. Sorry.
May we briefly see the experience of Anna and Professor Deanna about their own
Sure.
general experience first before we dig deeper into that in science.
Just that minding the time.
Yes.
I'll be super short. I spent 48 hours there. I didn't see almost nothing. So I have not much to say. I think Mani probably had the best experience of all of us about the COP26. We just had the rain, the cold weather, and the train. That's it. Thank you. And the COVID test, obviously, every day.
Anna?
Thank you.
My session was the first session from all the KAUST members that attended. I participated in the session organized by ION Collective. This is interesting because it's a non-government organization based in Riyadh that actually had space in the Saudi pavilion to leverage some important areas. And I want to highlight the panel discussion that I participated is regarding an effort that this non-government organization is doing to leverage key areas for Saudi Arabia, in particular regarding climate change and health. And KAUST have had a contribution on the chapter on air quality and health and the relation with climate. And this is an important topic for Saudi Arabia. There is not much work done on this specific space. So I think that was a starting of an interesting conversation that this non-government organization is trying to do in the government of Saudi Arabia. We can talk a little bit more on that, perhaps not today. But I think my experience generally, I felt that it's a bit overwhelming. There are thousands of people inside that pavilions. Every day we had 1 hour to enter the space with that metal detectors, with showing COVID test results. And then you have parallel, each pavilion that you saw here, I put say like 30 pavilions inside have their own program. And inside their programs there will be meetings happening. Could be with ministers. I saw Bill Gates, he was next to me when I go out, and I was with Natalia. So you would see certain people moving around these pavilions. They were part of these conversations. Would be, could be with the government sectors, could be with corporate, could be non-government. And I think this is the parallel dialogue that happens outside the plenary room, as would say that we were not allowed to enter. We could see on the platform if we were some sessions. So generally, I would say that we could question ourselves if it was actually worth to go and have this huge carbon footprint to travel to Glasgow. The amount of trash we generate each day, because each test we will do, imagine multiply by thousands of people that had to do these tests. So there are packages to dispose your things. So it's massive. So we can question ourselves, is this becoming too large? I think COP26 is now too large. Are we all needed there? Could we have different platforms to pass our own collaborations? That's the questions I came out after that 4 days that I spent in COP. So I think that generally I would assess this. I think the model needs to be revisited. It's just becoming too big. And we need to think what are the outcomes we want to have from COP. That's another part.
Thank you, Anna. Now let me go back to my question, that it was announced that around 3 times the finance is going to be for mitigation than adaptation, according to the plans announced in 2018 and 2019. So my question is, since mitigation projects are taking place more, is it easier to mitigate than adapt? And is the science and the technology is steering this towards mitigation? Mani?
Well, I think one of the messages of COP in there, especially from many of the developing nations, was a failure and mistrust in all the developed countries. This was a common theme for the first 1.5 weeks. That, I mean, this 100 billion was committed even much before Paris. It was done, I think, in 2008, and it was supposed to 2009, yeah, and it was supposed to come in 2021, and now 22, and it's not happened. And they haven't even come up with a plan of how they're going to happen. And the developed nations want targets from developing countries, but developing countries have not much trust in the developed countries because they haven't even committed money, let alone climate action, yeah? And so that was, I think the Scottish minister played a big role. I remember seeing a lot of interviews with her supporting these developing countries to try to get action on that. Now, how much will go to mitigation? How much will go to adaptation? I think the science will tell you adaptation is unavoidable. I mean, it's just a simple fact that we cannot mitigate all of our energy systems, environmental systems. I mean, the technology, regardless of how innovative we are, natural mineral resources. There was a very nice PhD thesis last week by Dr. Bolsan and Professor Patrick's group talking about these things. You cannot mitigate your way out of climate change. The renewable energy resources, the minerals and materials requirements do not exist. So you have to adapt. We need to mitigate, but we have to adapt as well. And adaptation. And then, you know, in COP, they want to be optimistic. They want to say we can have hydrogen, we can have renewables, we can have all these solutions, and promise everything to the people. But at the same time, they're not. The conference is not looking at the reality. Mm-hmm. The reality which many island nations are facing today already, which many developing countries are already facing. The reality exists. Their voice is unheard. They changed small words. The conclusion was for coal, they can't even phase out coal. Yeah, they phase down coal because a country like India doesn't want to phase out coal.
Right. And
so they're playing with words. Yeah, and the money. They said don't put it off till next year. How many years? If you're putting off money till next year, what promise is there to save the climate? I'm also skeptical when they put promises. It's like my kid, my 8-year-old saying, I'm going to be good. Don't give me video games on the weekend. Okay? They say, oh, we're now down to 1.8. We were at 2.1 at the start of the conference. Now with everybody's promises, we're down to 1.8. But promises, what? Where's the action?
Yeah, there is no legal restraint. There is no teeth for those agreements. It's up to each country to set their own targets. Maybe they meet them, maybe they don't. Depends on the circumstances sometimes. Natalia, what is your thoughts about this?
So it's don't have a lot of to add to Professor Mani's thoughts. Everything I really support that. Overall, COP, like in some ways, of course, it has a positive role. Like some countries came up with the newer agreements with a little bit more strict regulations on carbon emissions, but overall, just wanted to remind that Paris Agreement was was born in 2015 during the COP21, and why COP26 is important. And many people had a lot of how to say, expectations about this COP, because after Paris Agreement, after 5 years, it was supposed that countries come and they
make the 2015 Paris Agreement operational.
And if after each 5 years they revised their commitment or they came up with the newer versions of their commitment. That's why a lot of people were so eager to see what happens now. And that's why maybe people say that they're disappointed because they expected to see something similar that we had in 2015. It was a big theme, Paris Agreement. It was all over in all the news, right? And that's why maybe some of the people are disappointed or even angry because they didn't see strong commitments.
Right. Jaffer?
Yeah, thank you. I think the issue is more cultural and political than scientific. I think we all agree on that one. And I like it as thinking it as the fact that there are these advanced nations who have already polluted so much CO2 in the air, which normally they're supposed to be the ones cleaning up the mess if they polluted it already. And then there are these new nations who are coming up to pollute a lot, and you have to stop them somehow. And you have to play this fairness game in between those fractions. And that's impossible because I think of it as like racism in America. I worked and studied in America, in US, for 10 years. And I had colleagues in my research group in Texas. I had this white Texan Southern boy, and then there was this lady who was a black woman. So both were my group mates. And they fought over, I mean, very bitter fight. It happened, almost got the white boy expelled in the program. So I talked to Josh, the white boy, why do you really be racist? I mean, why are you racist? And he said, well, you know, why do I pay for my ancestors' troubles? I'm just a guy trying to get by, and his family wasn't that well-to-do. And he is lashing out that, why am I paying the price of my ancestors who did wrong things to black people? And then the black woman, I talked to her, and she says, these white people stole our freedom. They didn't give us food. We had to work our way up, and I have to sustain all my extended relatives, not only me. I mean, she was right that she has to sustain all her relatives, not even herself. So both are in the sense, right in their own sense. So you see the picture here. So the CO2 emissions, the developed nations, yes, we polluted already. We made the planet unlivable, but then we're trying to get by. We're trying to feed our kids. What are their problems? I mean, why would we give up on this? And then the developing nation says, well, we had to look up to you and stuff like that. So it's impossible to solve.
Yeah. Deanna, you said earlier you are teaching a course in circular carbon economy, circular carbon strategies.
Yes.
And you said at the beginning of the course that you were really depressed after you finised preparing for it.
Yes,
And
exactly.
I
I was
understand
depressed.
after taking a lot of classes with you. So do you think, I've repeated the question to you, do you think that mitigation is easier than adaptation? And is it that we are leaning toward mitigation because the countries who had the money, they don't suffer from climate consequences as much as other nations?
So it's a good point. I don't think that adaptation or mitigation are easier compared to each other. I think it's really a political problem, not a scientific or engineering problem. And you're right that the people who can make some changes, the countries that have enough money, they are not currently directly suffering a lot. They are suffering because we start to see also in Europe and in the US the change in the climate. I think adaptation, we will have to do that. There is no issue. Mitigation, if we want, we don't have to do it. And trying to invest in mitigation, I think it's important because this is a future. It's maybe a longer term future, but without mitigation, we go in a war, okay, or in a disaster for human beings. Right. So it's a complex problem because again, it's unfair depending on where are you living in which country. And I don't have the answer for that, but my point is that the long-term solution start with mitigation.
Okay. Anna, as the head of sustainability in KAUST, your role showcased how KAUST is climate aware of the challenges that we're facing. What do you think about the corporate or institutions' climate responsibility? And is it easy for them to really practice something impactful?
Well, there are different layers on this answer. I first would like to say that COP, and we also need to be aware that we are basing our future in pledges. And pledges are empty promises, right? If we don't have plans to put them in practice, they don't serve us. So the main point is actually for the countries to deliver a plan to reach their targets. And it starts actually by the math of the inventories, doing the greenhouse gas emission inventories. The same applies to our institution if we want to make a climate commitment, which we will. So to see the bigger picture, if nationwide we are pledging and hopefully making programs and plans to reach a target, each institution, being corporate, universities, need to also align. So, for example, when we receive the wonderful news that Saudi Arabia is now pledging to be carbon neutral by 2060, meaning that by default, KAUST will also need to be committed by 2060. Now, our challenge as an institution, especially driving research on that area, is to go beyond that. We need to lead by example. So the challenge for all of us, faculty that is doing research, students that driving movements, we all need to come up with a plan that should deliver before the 2060 using innovative solutions. That's what we are doing here, right? And actually using our space, our university, our campus as a living lab to show that it's possible, right? So, answer to your question, is it difficult? It will be costing a lot of money. And this is the tricky part. This will cost money. Let's take the example for KAUST. We are going to commit, for example, hopefully, don't quote me, carbon neutral, or being beyond that, zero emissions by 2030. Is this feasible? What does it mean for KAUST to do this? How we start? First, we cannot manage what we don't measure. We need to know what we emit as an institution. Now imagine this exercise for each country. We have commitments for CO2. One of the outcomes from COP26 was a methane pledge, because methane is a powerful greenhouse gas. So we need to understand what we are emitting to the atmosphere. And this math is very complex. And this math will imply on this budget of what is emitted, what can be synced. So it's very complex. And it also gives a space to play around with it. Okay? This is not an exact science. Now, take the example of KAUST as a small city. How are we going to manage our emissions? First, we need to know what we emit as an institution. And we call greenhouse gas emission inventories. There are methodologies for that. Think about how much we travel, business travel, how much we emit for electricity consumption. How are we going to tackle all of this? So this is the challenge that every country and every corporate and institution needs to go through. So it's difficult. It will cost money.
Yeah. That leads me to my final question. So one of the biggest excuses by politicians and businessmen and women is that being committed to reach climate change targets, it costs us money, and people don't really care, and they don't understand the full picture of the science of climate change, and they think it's complicated, and we don't have time to do that, and it doesn't serve the linear economic model to make, use, dispose, and make, use, dispose is the money generator. Following a circular economic model maybe doesn't generate as much money. What is our role as scientists and engineers to communicate this to legislators and to decision makers and to the community? How to get them to care? For example, when you talk to a restaurant, please stop using plastic. And they're like, people want that. I can't stop using that. I can't stop giving them forks and knives and stuff like that. So how can we reach and make them understand really what are the real consequences of climate change? Yes, please.
Too many.
Yeah, well, one thing I recognized is I took my first climate change course when I was 23 years old. I was a master's student in Toronto. It was actually 2004. And the course at that time talked about climate change, the impacts of climate change. And I was around 10, 12 years into all these COPs. And the discussion at that time was still, and until about 3-4 years ago, is climate change real? Yeah. And this discussion, the course was about demystifying, debunking the anti-myths, the myths that climate change is not real. But now we don't have that anymore. Nobody, okay, there might be a small fraction, a very small fraction, but you go to the COP, in some COPs in the past, this was the position of some countries, that climate change doesn't exist, we're not ready to agree. That's gone. Now it's not even, they don't even negotiate about climate change, the impacts, the risks. Every country realizes it's important, yeah? And that something has to be done. Now the question is what has to be done. That's what now they do. So when I look back, I see 15 years, 16 years it took for us to get to a point where the world thinks climate change is real. So when you ask the question that what do people want to do to change it? Yeah, I think it's already there. I think my son in the school, they're taught at a very young age about all these things. And again, I was educated about climate change when I was already an adult, but I think the transformation is happening. Yeah, I know most people here, we want to get rid of the plastic. We would be happy to spend a bit more to come to climate neutrality in the year, or carbon neutrality in the year 2030, right? If the plan is there, I'm pretty sure this community would come together, yeah, to implement it. So I think it's happening. The only problem is it's a very slow process, yeah? Like if you look again, it took us 15 years to agree that climate change is real. How long is it going to take then for everybody to realize these are the mitigation, adaptation solutions that need to be done? And we know the problem is during this period is just, it's exacerbating more and more.
So there is a gap between knowledge and action.
But I think knowledge is there. Action is, people are willing to do it. Now it's just about putting the brakes on this huge momentum we have in the wrong direction and moving it in the right direction.
Right. Anyone else wants to comment? Anna?
I have just some thoughts when I came out of COP, mainly, for example, on the pledge of India. And when you talk about people don't want to spend money, actually, it's very, I think we have two stages on this process. Countries that are struggling to move outside the poverty line and the money they need to invest, and should they put this money to clean technologies? And this is very tricky, right? You are talking about people that are in hunger. Now, the effort needs to come from institutions that are able to finance these green technologies, and like the World Bank. And this is being a lot of the discussion around that, because in the past this was not happening. They were not facilitating this process of lending money to developed countries to actually transition to clean energies. So this is actually under discussion. They need to create mechanisms to facilitate this process, to allow these countries to access money with low interest rates, because the risk is very high in their countries. So it's not the same if you borrow money to a rich country to a developed country. So this is a tricky part, right? But make us think, because sustainability, as we all know, is not only environment, right? It's the social aspect. Another point I want to raise is, what is the limit of profit? We have companies with huge amount of profit, where it stops. So how can we balance this, right? Another point I want to make is on the communication of science, and I think it's a very important point, because it's not easy to communicate science. Not all of us are able to do that. I'm a former scientist too, and I think this dialogue with policymakers is very important, and not every science can do that. Scientists can do that, but actually to digest the information that comes from numerical models, for example, or any specific technologies, and to actually propose solutions that are feasible for policymakers. This is the critical aspect. So this is the 2 points I want to mention.
Yeah. Speaking of science communication, I remember I watched the video on YouTube, and there was a scientist who said, I think every PI has to hire a science communicator just to tell people what the science he makes means. Jaffer, do you have something to add?
I'd like to raise one issue that never came out at any COPs that I've been tracking, which is the human rights equivalence of CO2 emissions. And I take it as per capita emissions should be used as the metric, so that who would pay first, right? So I wrote this in a CO2 review back in 2017 in a paper. If we were to address, like, assign a country who needs to pay up front, we need to go back to being human and say every human being has the right to emit a certain amount of CO2, right? If we're all the same, let's be the same. If you put that in the balance, India is well below world average. I think any country above the world average should be paying to a fund which pays to the ones that below the average to stop emitting. This is very simple math. It erases the borders in economics and finances, and the rich nations who pollute the world should be paying up immediately.
Right. Diana, you have something to add?
It's a good point, but I think it's not that easy. Because you have some solutions that are also complicated. So you have countries that are fortunate to have access to naturally to bioresources, like Saudi Arabia, for example, with the sun, or like Norway with the water for hydropower. But you also have countries that are a bit less fortunate and are counting on, for example, nuclear energy, which is really good for climate change, but has other problems. So just focusing on climate change is really a big deal, but it's not the only one. We are all of these boxes about hunger, about sustainability is not just climate change. And to put everything into the balance to try to be as fair as possible, I think it's a bit complicated. And this is also maybe one of the reasons why it's taking so much time to put everything into practice. Obviously, as human beings, we don't like changes. Usually, we like what we have, exactly. And any change can be a threat. So we are scared about that. Here we are facing a time where there is no choice. We will have to change something, and it's a time for opportunity, but it will take time for all of us to digest this information and to put that into action, for all of us to make a change in our life, to go in this more sustainable future. And it's true for every individual, but it's also even more true for countries.
Great, thank you. Thank you, everyone. And we have a few minutes for questions. Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Gilberto Calderon, and I want to ask if you were able to identify any technology or any way of doing things that we can implement in KAUST to lower the carbon footprint. For example, I saw the buses, the electric buses, it could be one option, but what else did you see there?
Well, I didn't honestly, during COP, there was no specific technology. I'm relying on KAUST knowledge and research and innovation to do that. I think we have it here. We're actually hosting, a big initiative, circular carbon initiative. Let's put it in practice. Does it work? We have a special place to test our model. We have a control environment. We are a city. We can model, and then we can scale it up if it works. So. I would say that I will first rely on our research, and I think we are very well positioned to do that.
Yes, the guy in there, Richard.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Abdurrahman Magdi from Professor Mani Group. I think the whole discussion is all about reducing the cost. In the 18th century, London was suffering from the soot formation because of the steam engine. They were burning coal, and the problem was solved when we invented the gasoline engine, which was cheaper and it was much better, no soot. So I think everything will be solved if we can reduce the cost, and then countries will switch directly. Now. How the LCOE, the levelized cost of electricity, how close are we to the conventional production means? So how close are we to that? And is there any sign that we can get the renewable energy cost to the levels of hydrocarbons? This is just Thank you.
So the cost of fossil-derived power, typically natural gas, in US dollars is 6 to 7 cents per kilowatt hour. Okay, $60 to $70 per megawatt hour for natural gas. For coal, it's around 3 to 4. Yeah, 3 to 4 cents per kilowatt hour. Now today, renewables, wind and solar, built in the right place are much cheaper. And this is why we see in North America, in Europe, they divest from coal and gas because it's cheaper. You can do wind and solar now for 1 to 2 cents, okay, per kilowatt hour. In Saudi, I think Aqua Power says it's around 1.3 cents per kilowatt hour. But this is without storage. Once you include storage for renewables, you're coming up to like 8 to 9 cents. So this is the reason a country like India will still invest in coal, because it's still half the price, and it takes about half the time to build a coal power plant compared to a renewable park. So the issue is storage, we know that, yeah, and the cost of storage. You know, is the technology going to get us out of this mess? Someday, but do we have time for that? Yeah, this is the question.
We have the potential to go to there, or what do you think?
You have the potential to do anything. Potential is potential. We have the potential to ruin the planet as well.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Yes, thank you. This is Ibrahim Abu Mati. I have a question. Throughout history, has there been any global cooperation to solve one major problem like the climate change? Because when you look at the history of humanity, it's full of conflict. So is this the first time where the global nations are focusing to solve one issue, where in fact you have, for example, China is emitting a lot and the people getting impacted are very far away from that region? I know there is no historian in the panel, but this is just...
The question of, sorry, is you are talking about the environmental, international agreements, right?
Yeah.
You have the ozone layer, right? The ozone layer was identified many years ago as a critical issue. And there was an international agreement to phase out these critical pollutants that were impacting our ozone layer. So it's possible. The question here, the climate change, the greenhouse gas emissions, it's a bigger challenge. Yeah, because we're talking about the other pollutants responsible for the ozone layer, refrigerants mainly. You are tackling specific sectors. In these cases, it's how we live, right? So as we were talking, are we relying only on technology to make the shift, or are we making a major transformation? Are we ready for that, the way we live, you know? Are we relying only on technologies to sequester carbon, for example, from the air, or to directly reduction from the source? Or are we trying to do a big transformation effort, for example, the way we commute in cities, talking about, for example, the way, the impact of transportation in cities. Is electrical vehicles feasible to, is this a way to go? So there's so many questions. And then if you start to assess the overall impact assessment of these technologies, they also have their backside. People don't talk about that, how these batteries are produced. Where is this material coming from? The social aspects of that, it's bigger. The question here is also the economy. The money drives. The challenge also for the governments to go beyond that.
Yeah, thank you. My second question is that wouldn't COVID-19 response give us hope that when we fall under crisis, we can innovate and we can be resilient? So we always talk about climate change will negatively impact. So I would like to hear your opinion about that.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. This threat against humankind, the government, they were able to at least have a kind of joint or common response. I think it's a good point. I think we will survive the issue of climate change if we increase fraternity amongst us, being all the same family, having a global family in the world. I think is the only solution. So going in this direction, I think it's a good direction.
Yeah, but I mean, COVID was a good example, but we spent a lot of money on it in a very short period of time. Besides the cost for the technology, governments put trillions of dollars, yeah, into social benefits, into maintaining the economy, and in addition to managing COVID and enabling the vaccines, trillions. Are we putting trillions of dollars to deal with climate change? We can't even come up with 100 billion a year for developing countries. But in developed countries, we pass bills for $1.5, $2 trillion to deal with the own local economy and dealing with COVID. So, I mean, yeah, but again, you need a lot more money. And there's been studies, there's an organization, I think it's called 1.5. They did the calculation about how much money is needed. Professor Santamarina shows it a lot in his talks, Carlos Santamarina. The investment is something like $3 to $4 trillion a year over the next 20 years. And it's not a huge amount. And just to give you an idea, the derivatives market, the derivatives part of the stock market, annual trading is around 400 trillion. That's derivatives. These are the bets, the hedges people put on the stock market. So we're putting 100 times more money into hedging on the stock market, and we won't even put that into hedging on the climate. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think the key word here is, are they willing?
I can quickly add that. So for many people who are not aware about the climate politics, like the common perception is, okay, we have already achieved something. We are talking a lot about climate change. We invest so much money in renewables. We see a lot of solar installations worldwide and wind. But I want to remind that all these investments are still minimal. They almost don't affect global CO2 emissions, which are, if you look at the map of concentration of CO2 emissions in the Manual law in Hawaii, like there are publicly available data every month updated, it's still rising, and there is not a single hint that it is declining. Even the COVID crisis that has led to a stop of a lot of activities, business activities, didn't really change the situation. So if we want to change situation with climate change, if we want to mitigate, we need to do a lot more, many times more that we do right now, because so far we don't really succeed.
Yeah.
Can I just enforce
yes, Anna.
An outcome from COP? I almost don't need it. Just to make clear that we currently, the national determined contribution which each country committed to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions are leading us to a path way beyond to 1.5. But whatever is actually happening right now is not enough, clearly. So I think there is this hope that everything will be okay, like in COVID, right? It's not. It's not. It's not going to be okay. So the message to adapt is very strong, because it's like the message is get ready, because it's going to hit us all. Now the problem is going to hit others, the poor. The poor are going to be hit harder than us. We will have money if our house gets down because there is huge flood here in KAUST. Someone will come and help us. The same will not happen to poor communities. And this is the critical part. Think about the millions of people, mainly Southeast Asia, they are going to be affected. They already live a very poor life with no resources, difficult to educate their children. And this is the critical aspect. How are we going to manage all of that? You saw big floodings in Europe, in Germany this summer. The language, as Manny was saying, everybody is aware. The language, the common language is climate change, it's climate change. These people that suffered that specific event will get help from the government. It's clear. Now, if you see the same kind of event happening in other countries, poor countries, this is not the same kind of response. So how is this community going to be adapt? And we need the help for rich countries to make this adaptation. And what kind of adaptation are we talking about? Especially, for example, communities, think about communities on the coastal zones, right? What kind of measures we need to put in place to protect these communities? So it's big. I don't want to end up with negative assessment, but I'm also realistic. I think the message, because we're almost finishing, and I think we need to be realistic. People sometimes come to me, oh, don't be like that. Don't be so pessimistic. I'm sorry, I'm realistic. We are not going on a good path, period. So the message is get ready. And we are relying on technologies to solve the problem. They are not even working today. So we are always in the hope, oh, next year, 10 years. Just let's see things in a very, very clear way. We are not on the right path.
Thank you, Anna. That's such a good way to...
Doesn't mean that every one of us should do an effort to try to do better, okay? That's another message. But meaning that there's a lot to be done,
yes.
Right?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Yes.
So, next term, I have a course called Sustainable Life Cycle Assessment in a chemical engineering program. And one of the things we do in this course is we have a UN climate debate. Okay, so it's actually a mock pretend COP26, yeah, we'll say nice. COP27. So it's fun. You don't have to register for the course if you want, next term probably it'll happen around March. So the people in the course attend, but also others, and you role play different countries, and you get to see the challenge that these policymakers have. So if you're interested, it's just another way of pretending you're at COP. Okay?
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending.